Hello, welcome to the Feminine Frequency podcast. Today we are talking with Cathy Lemire. Did I say that right, Cathy?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, good. And Cathy is the menstrual money coach. I am so excited to talk to you today, Cathy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Amazing, amazing. So, would you mind just starting us off by describing exactly what it is that you do? It sounds like such a unique niche.
It is, yes. And, when you're first thinking of these two things, like money and our menstrual cycles, you wouldn't think that they naturally go together or one is influenced by the other. Hopefully, by the end of our time today, um, you will see what I see where, like, once you see it, you can't unsee how interlinked and connected they actually are.
Yeah.
And, I've come to this journey just really through my own experiences and especially to financial coaching. Um, Started their coaching just kind of anyone and everyone. And it felt like, a little bit all over the place with various different types of clients. And that journey really, I got there through my husband and I, our own journey with money and our struggles and coming to a stressor in our marriage to where we were talking separation. I had left working outside the home, which was really challenging for me. That's not ever really how I envisioned things. I envisioned, like being able to do and manage both. And that wasn't really working for anyone. So I left working, and then that just created more financial stress for our family, which just led us to this point of something's got to give. And where I was literally laying in bed at night thinking, like, what if something happens to him? Like, I don't even know who we pay our mortgage to. I don't know what company we pay our electric bill to, things like that. And it wasn't that I had, just said, you take care of all this. And it was just this natural way of how things, you know, kind of fell and happened as we were growing and building our family.
Mm.
And neither one of us really knew what we were doing, right? Like we were just trying to wing it every week and every month and just kept saying like, well, when our kids are older, things will get better. When we get that raise, things will get better. And those things were happening and nothing was getting better. So that's what led me to financial coaching. And then I was coaching for many years, as I said, coaching all these different types of clients. And at the same time, I started going through like my own perimenopausal journey where my energy was just like varying widely throughout the month. My mindset was shifting so much throughout the month. Um, really, really increased feelings of anxiety and overwhelm. And I was starting to feel like an imposter and a fraud because my husband and I were still starting like arguing about money. And, I'm like, we have all these tools now and we have things under control. Why are we still like in this place? And so it was actually my husband who had said to me, um, do you think, are you just in the clouds? And I was like, what? Because like I use an app to track my cycle, and during your PMS phase, they put little clouds on the calendar. And I was really like at first offended and like, how dare you blame our, bickering over our money on my cycle and things like that. And he was like, it just, I'm just putting it out there. And so then I just started to notice, and I will admit it took me far too long to make that connection for myself because I had not been up to that point very in tune with our cycle, as many women aren't until things start going a little haywire. Up to that point, it's like, we're only really thinking about it one time a month. And,
Right.
in our earlier reproductive years, we only really think of our cycle in terms of fertility and how to get pregnant or how not to get pregnant. And we don't really think about everything else that's happening throughout the month. And so after, many months of this, I was like, oh my gosh, I think he's on to something. And, like major kudos to him and our partners, because, if you are having that increased sense of anxiety and overwhelm during that late luteal phase, they're the ones who are going to notice, right? Like they're the ones who might be walking on eggshells a week
Mhm.
every month. So they might be acutely aware of what's happening, even if we personally haven't made that connection yet. So as I started to have more awareness around my own cycle and my own tendencies and my mindset and the fluctuations and things like that, and just started reading everything I could about it, I started to hear the same things from my clients. And I started to notice that those were the types of clients that I was attracting. And would notice, like one week I would have a client show up and they would be so excited and so hopeful and feel so confident and good about where they were. And like couldn't wait to show me their budget, and they're like, everything's done and checked and blah, 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 and reconciled, and we'd have this great session. And then I would meet that same client 2 weeks later, and it was a different person. And the things I heard like all the time were like, I blew it again. See, I told you I'm no good with money. I always self-sabotage. And so I just started asking them, where are you in your cycle? And 9 out of 10 times they were saying, oh, I don't know. I think I'm just about to start my period. And I'm like, we need to lean into this a little more. So as I just started, going through my own journey, hearing it more from the women I was already working with, I'm like, I think there's something here to this. And the more I learned for myself, because what I just saw is the way our mindset shifts so much throughout our cycle has just such a major impact on our money if your money is a stressor for you in your life already. And then if your money is a major stressor for you and you already feel overwhelmed by it and anxious about it, then that increased stress then just exacerbates your symptoms. Like it's just linked. And so one of the biggest shifts we make is just having that awareness of where you are and knowing, what tasks are the right thing to do during which phase of your cycle. And to just give yourself huge amounts of grace, because knowing in a few days from that, you're going to feel entirely different about your situation again. But when we don't make that connection, that is the story we just start to tell ourselves of, I'm just no good with money. I self-sabotage all the time. I'm never going to get it. Why bother? Right. So when we haven't made that connection, and then that becomes a part of our identity. And then it just becomes too overwhelming to even think I can
Yeah.
even take
Yeah.
this on.
Yeah. It becomes a story that kind of repeats in our heads and
Yep.
then can take us just down the wrong path and
Right. And
take us
then
off
months
track.
and months and years of that. And then you just keeps putting the money piece aside. And then either, something happens, or you just come to a point where, you're so overwhelmed, you're paralyzed and don't know what to do. So we're trying to break those patterns of thought and, bring some feminine energy into something that otherwise can feel really kind of has a lot of masculine energy with it when we're talking money and money management and wealth and growing wealth and things like that. So it just, brings a little bit more of some feminine energy to it to make it less intimidating for women to want to jump in and manage their money.
So interesting. And as you were talking, I was just thinking because my husband and I were actually just going over our household budget
Mhm.
because we hadn't done that in a little while. And, most of our bills are on a monthly cycle,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
I never thought about that before, but like a lot of our bills are set up on automatic payments or they have monthly due dates. And
Mhm.
it's like, so I wonder, like going back now, looking at where am I in my cycle when like those bigger bills hit, like it probably feels more stressful because it's at, the later part of my cycle, and there might be more tension, there might be more stress between us as
Mhm,
partners due to
mhm,
that. What if we actually, or I intentionally, like, created a billing cycle that was in
mhm.
line with my cycle, right? That might actually help us out a lot with the
Yeah.
emotional part.
Yep. I've had a partner say to me like, "Oh, I know exactly when my wife's, when she's," and we all have like different patterns of how this might express within us. But he was like, because I notice the Amazon packages start piling up, right? So for some women, that like luteal phase where increased senses of overwhelm or anxiety, right? Some of us might scroll Instagram or whatever, and or Amazon, and we're carting and things like that. For some women, like their ovulation phase, when they're a little more outgoing and a little more extroverted, things like that, that's when it's like yes to everything. It's yes to girls' night, it's yes to happy hour, it's yes, 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 because you just want to go out and be with people. And maybe being a little more impulsive in your spending. And then that's when you're checking in on things a week or two later, when you start to see those expenses that you're like, oh, I blew it again. And that's just how that cycle keeps repeating. So we want to try and plan for as much as that as we can in both our money and what's coming up and looking ahead, but also looking at our social calendar and our obligations and what things might we have to say no to, what things can we not say no to, right? That,
Mhm.
if we can just start to make these shifts and anticipate about 75% of what's coming up both for us financially and just in our life in general, it makes that, unexpected 25% a lot easier to manage.
Mm. And you'd mentioned that you were experiencing perimenopause. You don't look old enough for perimenopause. So do you mind sharing, like, what is that age range approximately?
So for me, I'm 45. And
By
I
the way.
you're 45 as well? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll be 46 in just a few months. For me, that started, I would say, probably about 2 to 3 years ago, of just even, just feeling like, my luteal phase was really intense. I think that's when I first went to my physician, my primary care doctor, and saying like, "Hey, I think something's going on here." Because I feel crazy, like I'm ready to lose it, and um she was kind of like, "Welcome to perimenopause, totally normal. I'll put you on the pill." And I just thought,
Oh, interesting.
that is not the answer I was hoping for. And, so I personally, in my experience, I felt incredibly dismissed and, was like, well, it might be common, but that doesn't make it normal. Those two things are not the same. And,
Yeah.
just left feeling actually more hopeless than when I had gone in. I was like, at that time in my early 40s, I'm like, I'm not really looking to go on birth control at this point in my life. And, um, and I was just frustrated. And I think that's how a lot of women feel, right? Like
Mhm.
they're just frustrated with this phase of this midlife phase because you try and get help and you're dismissed from your doctor, or you feel like with your money, by this point you should have it all figured out and things like that. And when you don't, it can be really challenging. And so, by bringing these two things together, for me personally, I feel like it's a very powerful way to serve women. Um, because I think when we have agency over our bodies and our health and our money, we are incredibly powerful and we have choice. And
Yeah.
that is my mission, and in how I choose and wish to serve women in that capacity.
I
And
love that.
for them to know, you are, your experience is valid and it's real. It's not all in your head. And that there are other providers out there who will listen to you. So, which is what I
Yeah.
did. I got a new doctor.
Amazing.
Mhm,
That's amazing advice and amazing message. And yeah, I couldn't agree more that, it's so important to feel empowered about your health and about your money.
mhm,
And the way you're bringing them together is really quite extraordinary. So, I mean, I can't believe I've never even heard of this connection or made this connection, before. But like you said, it's like once you kind of see it, and I'm sure you have so much more wisdom to share, but now I'm already seeing that, yeah, of course, there's a
mhm,
rhythm with both of them.
mhm.
And
Yes.
it's working with that rhythm and not against it. That is so powerful,
Right.
right?
Right. And that's, that is my goal for the women that I'm working with, is to help them work smarter, not necessarily harder, right? So, and by slowing down, we don't have to, a lot of times I think when we think of, well, we have to get our spending under control, or, go on a budget or things like that, it almost can feel like a crash diet for your money,
Hmm.
which isn't sustainable, right? That's like any goal that you're trying to reach. So by slowing down and getting in sync with your cycle and taking time to reflect and evaluate and set your intentions for your upcoming cycle, it's a little bit of a slower process, but it's one that feels more sustainable and not just a, crash diet that may not feel sustainable 6 months from now.
I really love that. I would love to know more about that. But first, I know like a lot of people come to me with the question of what if I don't have a cycle
Mhm,
anymore or for whatever reason?
mhm.
How do you work with women with in that situation?
Yeah. A lot of women that I work, they are still on hormonal birth control, or they're past the point where they're no longer having a regular cycle, or, they have other health conditions that interferes with a regular cycle. So in those, but they still want to embrace this cyclical way of living. So for, those, when we follow the lunar calendar, or the lunar cycles with the moon, because the moon and our cycles are, very connected and linked, and each phase of the moon cycles really connects and represents a phase in our menstrual cycle. So the new moon represents our menstrual bleed, and then our follicular ovulation is the full moon. And if you look back, through the centuries, when more women were all cycling together because they had the same amount of exposure to daylight, and they lived in communities more, and moonlight, things like that. Fertility festivals were always held on the full moon, because that's when we're more likely to be ovulating. Um, and then as you go to the later phases, it's the waxing moon, and things like that. So we can follow the lunar cycles for, and then,
Okay,
yeah, yep,
that makes a lot of sense.
yep, which is
Great.
actually a really cool thing
Yeah.
to do, and just have that connection, even if you are cycling, just to see where you are and how your cycle follows the lunar cycle, is a fun connection to make, to just a little, more deeply embody that cyclical living.
Yeah, actually, I think that's exactly how mine goes.
Mhm.
Ovulation around the full moon.
Which is like right now. So tonight is
Yeah.
the full moon. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And new moon is usually when I get my period. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
cool. Okay. Um, so yeah, what would it look like to set your financial intentions for your upcoming cycle? Like what's an example of what that might entail?
So the best time to do that would be during your bleed, your menstruation phase, or the
Okay.
new moon. And I do host a monthly new moon workshop where we're doing just this, because even though we might all cycle slightly different, we're all under the same moon and the same moon phases.
Mhm.
So it's a time when we're a little more naturally inward, we're a little more introspective, energy is lower. So it's a great time to really reflect on what happened in the last cycle and
Okay.
look at, like what went well, what maybe didn't go so well, and what do you want to do differently. So if we can, just start focusing on those two or three things that we pull out of that from that, and what we might want to do differently moving forward, and set those intentions for our next cycle, instead of having a to-do list of like 10 things. If we're really just focusing down on one or two things, we can slowly start to make progress that then when you look at over the course of a year or 6 months, whatnot, you can see how far you've come, even if you weren't doing these big grand sweeping, you know, things like paying off massive amounts of debt or something, because, that might just look like, what I didn't do really well this cycle was, um, eating the food that I bought at the grocery store. Right? Like we
Mhm.
go to the grocery store, we buy all the food, and then by like Wednesday, Thursday, we're like, ugh, I don't want to make anything, and we're ordering out. That's a very, very common thing that happens, right? So if you're looking at like, I didn't do so well with that piece this month, this cycle. So what I want to do differently is I actually want a meal plan. So I know I have a plan for the food that I'm buying. And then that is your goal, right? So if you focus on those things and it's at the forefront of your mind, I'm going to meal plan, make a plan for the food that I buy. At the end of that cycle, you're going to notice your numbers are going to be in what you had set at the beginning of the month and what you said you were going to spend and allocate your money to for these various things, right? So that might not be totally changing your financial picture, but just doing that one small thing is going to boost your financial confidence. And for you to see, like, okay, I can do this. And that's just one small thing. So I did that really well. What do I want to work on the following month? Right. So it's just like making these little tweaks month after month without, saying, okay, so this month, my goal is to pay off $10,000 worth of debt, right? Like, or in the next 3 months or whatever that might be. Like sometimes those really, really big goals, and then we, are in that just hustle mindset to make that happen. But then 3 months comes and you met it or you didn't, and then you just fall off the wagon. So these are just the small little shifts that we can make throughout the month to just keep us moving in that forward direction and just constantly evaluating how we're doing in a very gentle way that doesn't, have to put a lot of pressure on yourself or give you a to-do list of a million things, because that's the last thing that we need.
Absolutely. I love
Yeah.
that. And it's like back to that crash diet analogy. It's,
Mhm.
making these small tweaks in your lifestyle rather than, things that you can maintain over time rather than these sudden big, you know,
Right.
changes that you're not going to be able to sustain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I really love habit stacking too, because like you
Mm-hmm.
said, it really builds trust in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Start with a small thing you can implement over time consistently, and those small things can really add up
Mm-hmm.
over
Yep.
months and years.
Yeah.
So,
And that's where, we really start to see the progress, because
mhm.
I think so many people think that, um, in managing their money is strictly a math problem. And what I can tell you from years and years with working with many people, it's almost never a math problem.
No.
The math piece of it is about 20%. So what we're doing in coaching is really working on that other 80%, which is our habits, our beliefs, our mindsets, um, organization, things like that. If it were simply just a math problem, many of us probably wouldn't have the money problems that we experience. I
There's
know
a
like that was that was the case. And I'm speaking that from my own experience as well. When my husband and I first started our journey in paying off our own debt, um, the real issue was lack of communication, lack of a plan, lack of a goal, lack of even really knowing and having awareness of where our money was going. It was where we thought there just isn't enough money. But
Mhm.
when we sat down and when we really looked at it and we were like, holy cow, where has this money that could help us get to our goals? Where has it been going? Right. So it was not a math problem, which is what we thought. And the biggest thing is a communication problem and not being on the same page. He and I together were not in alignment with what we were working towards. I was just like, I don't even know what we're supposed to be working toward. And he was just 100% focused on retirement. So we had very different um goals, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, when there's misunderstandings and no communication,
Mhm.
speaking from experience, it can definitely become a conflict and
Yeah.
become very emotional very fast.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
that's huge.
Hmm.
Awesome. So you mentioned the monthly workshop on the new moon. Is
Hmm.
that something you do online or in
Yeah,
person?
I do it via Zoom, just like this. Yep. Hmm.
Awesome. Awesome. And how can people find you if they're interested in attending?
I mostly promote that through Instagram, or you can always get on my email list. I am sending the links out there actually I'll start sending out for the June workshop today or tomorrow, actually on Friday. But that's where I tend to hang out the most is on Instagram.
What's your handle?
The Menstrual Money Coach.
Of course, of course.
Yep. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Um, have you found other financial coaches working in this realm?
No, I've connected with many women and other coaches who are really working in the cycle awareness space.
Mhm.
But I haven't, as far as I know, in all the financial coaching groups that I'm in, I'm the only one who's in this niche per se. So, and I have to give credit to my mentors where I was at a symposium several years ago, and they were the ones that were pointing out to me like you have like many different business models by just coaching all these different types of people, and making it really overwhelming to have a model for your business. And I was like, well, I kind of have this feeling of this is who I really want to work with. But I feel like it's just way too specific. It's way too out there. And what I love now and have fully embraced is that we're dealing with, the math and the numbers and the spreadsheets, but there's a big dose of like woo in there too. And I love that. So I'm like, I just don't know how about this. And then the next day it had kind of spread among the group that I was with, and I just had all these other women coaches coming up to me saying, you have to do this. Like, I get what you're doing, I get what you're saying, I've experienced it, this would be perfect. And so but I was really nervous to go all in on this niche in the beginning. And when I first started putting myself out there and marketing and things like that, I was actually getting quite a lot of pushback from other women
Really?
who, yeah, were just, DMing me, emailing me saying, this is just really gross what you're doing. We don't need to talk about this. We just, deal with it and move on. And I was like, okay, I'm like, maybe there's not a place for this. And it's taken me some time to grow my own confidence. And the more messages that I received like that, the more I thought, you know what, I actually need to double down on this effort because, the message I was getting was, these are two taboo topics. They're taboo for a reason, and we suggest you uphold the taboo. And I just, started to think, when has upholding the taboo ever really worked out well for women? And if the best language we have to talk about these things are like, this is gross, this is yucky, we don't need to talk about this, then clearly there's a need for someone to be talking about it.
Wow.
So I, at that point, was like, well, now I just have to go all in. So yeah, so I'm as far as like the cycle awareness, I've connected with many women who are in that and cycle coaches and things like that. But bringing in the money piece and the financial coaching side, um, as far as I know, I'm the only one doing that.
Wow, I am just like celebrating you. That is so awesome that you took those messages and used them as fuel to
Yeah.
go forth in your venture, and you had the courage to do that despite what other people might think. So I'm just
Yeah.
like so
And
excited.
it was discouraging and disheartening because, those messages were not coming from men. They were
Right.
coming from other women. And, and at the same time, I had messages coming from other women who were maybe like postmenopausal at that point, who were reaching out saying, I am so happy the generation coming up behind me is talking about these things because I have experienced everything you've talked about, and we had no one to talk to. Not even our best friends were we talking to about it. So, I've received messages on both ends.
Right. Right. That's very interesting for
Mhm.
sure. And as an entrepreneur yourself, I wonder if you could speak to, fears that come up around money. Because I know for a lot of people that is such a,
Mhm.
it's such a deeply rooted thing, this fear of
Mhm.
scarcity and of lack, and it prevents people, a lot of people, from following their heart and doing what it is they truly want to do, and sometimes even addressing money at all. And there's so much of that fear around the topic of money for so many
Mhm.
people.
Yeah, I think money, money is a hard thing to talk about, whether you're talking about it as an entrepreneur or even as, your personal finances. Because
Mhm.
if, your personal finances are a mess, like those, things you might be saying to yourself are, I can't even manage this. How do I think I'm going to be able to manage a business? And I think, just the entrepreneurial journey in and of itself can be really challenging, and it can feel like a roller coaster and ebbs and flows. And I think the challenge is really mastering those thoughts when, not getting on the ride, right? To take you up and down and just staying the course. And for me, I think it's always about connection. And connecting with people like you, and being able to have these one-on-one conversations instead of, for me trying to do TikToks and reels and things like that. It's about being genuine. And I think anytime you can show up authentically as yourself and be genuine and know who you're serving and why you're serving them. And if you stay focused on that, that is how you grow. And as you grow, the money will come. But if you're feeling, it's hard to feel like a confident businesswoman
Mm-hmm.
if maybe you don't feel confident managing your personal money as well.
Mm-hmm.
If that piece of your life feels overwhelming and a mess, that is definitely going to bleed into how you feel about money as a businesswoman.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And as you were kind of describing before from your own personal story, if you don't have financial agency, then it can most definitely affect your life choices.
Mm-hmm,
You have less freedom, less
mm-hmm,
choice.
mm-hmm.
So there's a lot to be unpacked there for sure.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, you're doing amazing work. I'm just so happy that we connected and to learn more. This is just really fascinating. And yeah, I think, there's definitely like in my work, there's a lot of healing that disconnect from ourselves that has happened through cultural conditioning and programming, disconnect from our bodies, disconnect from our intuition, disconnect from our creativity, our passions, and things like that, that is very pervasive. And this is so congruent with that work because you're really, bringing us back to our bodily wisdom
Mm-hmm.
in regards to money, which is so vital and beautiful. So I really appreciate the work you do and honor the work you do and the path you've chosen. So
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's, really, both pieces are about coming back to a place of connection, right? Coming back to a place of being connected to our body, embracing that piece of ourselves, because within each phase we have a superpower, and knowing that and recognizing that, and embracing that, instead of just like, I don't want to think about it, I don't want to think about it, like that, I don't want to think about it, I don't want to deal with it, is a place of disconnection. So coming back to a place of connection, um, it just, the idea and the goal is to be able for you to show up in a way that you want to be showing up with your family, with your friends, at work, things like that. And then it's the same thing with our money, is coming back to a place of being connected to what is the life that we really want to be living? Are we living that? If not, what is getting in the way? What are the goals that we're working toward? Like, I just can't tell you how many people are just going through the motions day in and day out, and of paycheck to paycheck, and they're not looking or thinking much beyond that next paycheck. And so getting out of that cycle and being connected to a bigger goal or a bigger dream, and being connected to what it is that you really want and not being afraid to go after it, are it's the connection is at the core of both aspects of my work.
Wow. Yeah, I love how you said that. So who would be the typical or the ideal person that you might work with? Would it be someone like, do they need to have assets, or would it be someone who's just beginning this journey? Like where do you find your clients typically are in their journey?
I think typically they're reaching that point when they feel like they have been putting things off for too long, and probably in a transition in life to where things are feeling really overwhelming, and also just energetically depleted, going, doing all the things. And, so much, I think, of the cycle awareness and coming back to cycle syncing, so much of it is about boundaries, which can be really hard for us as women sometimes. And because sometimes what that means is saying no if things are not in, you know lining up. We have a lot more control over our schedules than we think we do, and sometimes when we say no, what we're doing is then holding on to that energy and taking care and listening to our bodies so that we can show up for our kids in the way that we want to, and we're not just so depleted all the time. So we can better manage our energy. And so they're feeling the hormonal roller coaster of being up and down, feeling like they just don't even know where to begin with parsing out the details of their money.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing today. If it's okay with you, I will put the link to your workshop in the show notes so people can check it out. And also your Instagram so people can find you.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. This was wonderful. Yeah, hope to stay connected. And thank you so much for your time today, Cathy.
Thank you for having me, Carrie. This has been fun.
Welcome.
Yeah.